Hello, I'm Jessica Kozar of Boardman High School TV, along with my co-host, attorney Mark Huberman. And we are pleased to bring you another edition of Boardman Biography, a BSTN program devoted to profiling educators and community members who have made significant contributions to the Boardman schools and the Boardman community.
Our guest for this edition of Boardman Biography is the current owner of a business that is truly an institution in Boardman that generations have patronized. This owner is a proud Boardman graduate. His kids are proud graduates, and his wife, he and his wife still make Boardman their home. I'm speaking to none other than the owner and operator of Lonardo's legendary greenhouse on Southern Boulevard, Frank Lonardo. Frank, welcome to Boardman Biography.
Thank you for having me.
Before getting into the history of Lonardo's greenhouse, let's talk about your growing up in Boardman. Which one of the Lonardo brothers was your father?
Arthur.
And what was your mother's name?
Antoinette.
That's my mom's name too. What did she do?
Just a housewife.
Do you have any brothers and sisters?
I have 7 siblings.
7?
Oh.
Yeah.
Wow. Catholic.
Yeah, good Catholic.
There you go. Okay.
There are 2 houses on either sides of Lonardo's. Did you grow up in one of them?
Yeah, the house to the south side of Lonardo's greenhouse. That's where I was raised.
And you went to the Boardman schools. Which schools did you attend?
Stadium Drive, Glenwood, Boardman High School.
Did you have any favorite teachers?
Yeah, I had a lot of good teachers. Offhand, I can't think of too many right now. I have Mr. Brenner, was a good teacher.
Science teacher.
Yeah, Glenwood. I enjoyed Mr. Brenner's classes. Mr. Lalumia was a good teacher at Glenwood. And then through school, at high school, Mr. Fox was a very good teacher that I had. I had a lot of excellent teachers. It's kind of hard to point out just a few.
Were you involved in any activities in school?
I wrestled in junior high. I was involved in football, and then in track and some of the sports. And then in high school, then I was in wrestling for 2 years.
Mr. London? Was it Mr. London in those days?
No, it was Coach Fox was my coach during my freshman year and sophomore year.
What year did you graduate?
1977.
And did you go to college after high school?
No, I didn't.
Okay. So, your wife Donna, where did you guys meet?
We met like a lot of people do, through friends. We both had some mutual friends, and they kind of hooked us up.
Was it love at first sight?
It absolutely was. I tell people that, and they don't believe me, but it was. The first time I met her, I knew I was in love and gonna marry the woman.
And where did you meet?
Just out for coffee with friends.
And how many years?
We've been married 32 years.
About that. Okay, very good.
Can you tell us about your children?
My son Ray is 24, and he went through he went to Stadium, Glenwood, and Boardman High, the same as I did. And was telling Mark earlier, he was involved in jazz band and just in wrestling also, and cross country.
Did his music talent come from you?
No, it's just a fluke. But and my daughter Maria, who is 23, went through the same Stadium, Glenwood, and she was involved in volleyball and basketball. She loved volleyball.
And what do they do now?
My son is, he went on to Case Western Reserve, and he's a mechanical engineer, and he works in the Columbus area now. My daughter, she went to Kent State for nursing, and through the Air Force ROTC program, and she's a lieutenant, second lieutenant in the Air Force, and she's currently stationed in Tampa, soon to be Biloxi, Mississippi is where she'll be stationed.
So tell us about the history of Lonardo's. How long has it been around? Who started it?
Well, that gets to be easy. That's like second nature. My grandfather, Vito Lonardo, who immigrated in the early 1900s, worked at a powerhouse in one of the mills where they generated the steam, and he shoveled coal for a living. That was his job. And he came from an agricultural background in Italy, and he started by growing a lot of plants, you know, the vegetable plants for people's gardens. And it was kind of a hobby that turned into, you know, a part-time career for himself.
And so did he start the business himself, or?
Yeah, pretty much. Of course, at that time, and then going into the 20s and the Depression, the sons worked with the father, and he had, believe it or not, on, it was St. Louis, 506 St. Louis, they had a house and an empty lot next to him that they had purchased, and he had cold frames where they would grow bedding plants. They also would, at that time it was called truck farming, and they would come down here right across the street from the high school.
The Agnew farm.
Where Donnell sits now. They had bought a piece of property there, and they would grow vegetables and bring down to the Pied Street Market.
So back then there was the Agnews, the Garvers, and the Lonardos, huh?
Yeah, and they rented a lot of property from Maruskin Farms. We're down just south of...
like next to Donnell.
Right, and down next to, and there was a Gray's Farms, and they rented some property, and they owned a piece right by Donnell's also.
So when did Lonardo's itself, what we know as Lonardo's today, come about?
In 1946, they bought a small greenhouse in Boardman that was already existing. It was a very small operation. It was Darrow's Greenhouse, and they purchased it in 1946. And they moved out. They were still living on the south side, and they would travel back and forth, and they started adding on to the greenhouse, and it started to become...
So who were the Lonardo boys?
Mike Lonardo was the eldest son, Howard was the middle, and my father, Art, was the youngest. They had an older sister, Josephine, also.
So you lived on the south side of Lonardo's, closer to West Reserve Road.
Correct.
Howard lived on the north side?
Correct.
And where would Mike live?
Mike still lived in town. He was never going to leave.
So he commuted.
Youngstown.
So were tomatoes and cucumbers always the staples of Lonardo's?
Yeah, pretty much. At that time, they didn't have the shipping that we have now, and if you wanted fresh, good quality tomatoes through the off season, they were produced mainly in greenhouses. And Northeast Ohio, Cleveland area, and our area was a large producer, hundreds upon hundreds of acres of tomato, cucumber, leaf lettuce production. So
what I remember in Boardman, that on just to the north on Southern Boulevard was Inglis.
Correct.
Did Inglis at one point have tomatoes, or were they always flowers? I thought they did.
Inglis grew tomatoes also.
And how was did you work in the business growing up then?
Always.
So, yeah?
Yeah. From when we were kids, we always had jobs, whether it was helping, packing, loading, picking, cleaning the greenhouses. There was always work in the greenhouse.
And so how was the ownership divided up between Howard, Mike, and...
thirds, yeah. Excuse me. Mike had the business knowledge and business connections. Howard was more of a technical guy. He had gone to school for electrical technician, so he handled a lot of the mechanical parts of it, and Art was mainly in the growing end of it.
And did they all get along?
Yeah, they did.
Yeah. And so when did you take over? When did you and Donna take over?
In the 70s, with the energy crisis, things started to go poorly for growing greenhouse tomatoes anymore. Tomatoes were being shipped in from Florida and Mexico and so on, and things started to decline as far as the demand for quality tomato, more so for a cheaper product. And so that put pressure on my father and uncles, and they were closing that aspect of the greenhouse by the early 80s. In 1981, I built a greenhouse behind my father's and started growing bedding plants and flowers. And once they had closed the tomato production at the greenhouse, then we worked out a land contract. My wife and I worked out a land contract deal, and by 1984, 85, we were growing mainly in the main location that we're at.
Does Lonardo still have a pretty loyal customer base of people that have been coming to Lonardo's for?
Yeah, we do. You yourself, Mark, and your mom and your father, who I've seen weekly growing up as a child, and very good friends. My father and uncle loved your parents.
Very good.
About the greenhouse today, what is the seasons that you're open?
We're open April through December 31st, and then that's our retail. We sell our flowers, our spring and flowers starting in April, May, June, excuse me, and we also have a produce market going during that time.
I understand that you now do some farming in Canfield off of 224. Can you tell us about that? Like how many acres and what do you grow there?
Yeah, we have 54 acres, and we raise about 8 acres of various vegetables. We just ran out of room in our greenhouse in Boardman. Also, a big thing is we're trying to grow what is called like a sustainable, and we have nice fresh soil out there. Growing in the greenhouse and the greenhouse areas over the year, the areas, the fields that we have in Boardman, you have to let them rest. And at the farm in Canfield, with that much acreage, we can let some of the land lay fallow. It's nice to be able to separate vegetable production from floral production because of chemicals that you might use in the floral production. You don't want them to migrate into your vegetable production. So we do purely vegetable production in Canfield and the horticulture floral production in Boardman.
Are gift baskets a big part of your holiday business?
Yeah, they are. Fruit baskets are a big thing for the Christmas, not as much as it used to be. It used to be a real treat for people to get fresh produce and fruit and oranges, and now not so much.
Is it an expensive operation from the standpoint of energy and water to run greenhouses?
Yeah, the energy consumption and energy conservation is what I believe has made us successful over the last 30 years or so. The greenhouses used to be single pane glass, and in 1987 I rebuilt my first greenhouse at the location. We used what was a Lexan. It's a polycarbonate, a double pane polycarbonate, which made the greenhouse much more efficient. Now we've moved on to triple pane polycarbonates rather than glass. We still have some greenhouses we produce in that are glass, but every year that decreases, and the amount of production that we have in Lexan and poly, where we have much better energy efficiency.
I still see sometimes greenhouses covered with plastic.
Yeah.
So what is the point of adding plastic or?
Well, you get that airspace. You have 2 layers of plastic with air force through there, and you have that nice airspace, and it gives you a much better R value.
So does greenhouse growing limit the need for the use of pesticides? What's the nature of that kind of growing?
Yeah, you do have more control. You control the watering, which is a big issue with growing outside. Every time it gets rained on at night, you have a chance for mildew and fungus to grow, root rot. But in the greenhouse, you can control that. We have drip irrigation that goes directly to the root system, so the foliage is seldom wet.
And what about bugs? Do you also control bugs that way, just by the nature of its being grass and bugs?
Yes, you can control some of the insects that you would normally, you can keep some of the insects out that you would normally.
They say that, at least when I've read the Environmental Defense Fund that talks about the safest foods to buy, the most pesticides used, and one of the ones they always talk about are peppers. Bell peppers, for some reason, have more pesticide residues and all that, yet they're grown in greenhouses, mostly, I think. Or most
would be raised outside. That is probably because they're in the mass growing, they're machine harvesting them, and everything has to be perfect when it's machine harvested, so there's less hand sorting. The way we are growing our vegetables, it's as much a state of mind as it is the actual process. You have to make decisions. This season, for instance, we had a beautiful crop of tomatoes in greenhouses at the farm, and we were probably about 3/4 of the way through our production, and we had not powdery mildew, but botrytis blight get in there, and that will start to put stress on the plant, and you get smaller tomatoes, and it reduces the yield of the crop. So you make it, it's a very simple decision. You're 3/4 of the way through the crop. Are you going to go in there? We haven't sprayed any chemicals whatsoever in there. Are you going to go in there and use chemicals now to save 25% of the crop, or just finish it? We always decide to finish it. Just go through, let the mildew do what it does, the fungus and mildew do its damage, the crop's over. You lost 20%, but you didn't spray any chemicals. Is it worth spraying these chemicals to save 20%?
So you seem inclined to be part of the sustainable agriculture movement and all that?
Absolutely.
Think it's healthier for the planet, healthier for everyone?
Absolutely. We have come, I'm worrying today about if we have enough snow cover for our cover crops at the farm where we grow our crops. We have one field, 5-acre field that we've been growing in for 3 years, and now we'll let it lay fallow. We have cover crops in there that will hold the nitrogen from washing off into the waterways and put nutrients and green organic matter back into the soil, and we'll let that run through maybe a 2-year cycle of just cover crops. And some of them, if you don't have enough snow cover and you get in the single digits, they may freeze off.
So that old saying about healthy soil, healthy plants, healthy people?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Very good. So, you've got to tell me one thing I've wondered my whole life. What is the secret of Lonardo's the tomatoes having such a special flavor? You do. They're unique.
I don't know. Maybe it's the growing process and the varieties that we use. This year we trialed a few of newer greenhouse varieties, just maybe 50 or 60 plants. They did not get botrytis. They were very healthy right up to the end, but the flavor wasn't there. So we will not be trying those. We're going to stick to our old standards. They may not have as much disease tolerance, but they produce a very good quality tasting.
Do you have expansion plans for the future?
We're still working. We have a couple more greenhouses we want to put up at the farm to increase, give us a better variety of...
How much acreage do you have there?
At the farm?
No, on Southern Boulevard.
On Southern, 5 acres.
So you're kind of landlocked where you are.
5 acres.
5 acres in the day was pretty good.
Yeah, we used to be, at its peak, it was 3.5 acres under glass cover. And we had to tear down for our parking, and we actually have rebuilt most of all the greenhouses, and we're probably at just under 2 acres of greenhouse production in Boardman.
When the business closes in December, at the end of December, do you go south for a few months, or are you already getting ready for the next season?
West into the greenhouse. It's 70 degrees out there, and we have seedlings growing right now. We have one house that we start early November, some seedlings for next year, and our whole crew, the crew that you would see, the women, my wife, the people that work in the produce area, at the register or stocking the produce are now in the greenhouse transplanting. We're filling pots, we're transplanting flats, hanging baskets, planting seeds. It gets busy. We're 40 hours a week in January, and which is for us great because we're used to 48.
You're on vacation.
Yeah, we're on vacation. By the time we get to February, we're up to 48 hours, and then March, it's whatever it takes.
During the time that you're not working, what do you do for fun?
Just visit friends and family. I love to go out to the farm and walk around in the woods. We have a nice section of woods. I don't hunt, but I enjoy just walking and hiking. A lot of people like to go jog. I like to walk through the woods, and that's about it.
Are you sometimes amazed that when you grew up on Southern Boulevard, kind of a lonely little quiet area, now you're surrounded by St. E's and the Field of Dreams and the Y and all that, how it's transformed?
It is. It happened. It's progressed over, the 30, 40 years. And I tell people all the time, my wife is from New Springfield, and I tell her I grew up in the country because we were surrounded by Garver's Field was behind us, and we used to run through Garver's cornfields, and there were nothing but woods on either side. And when I tell people I grew up in the country, they look at the location and they know you didn't.
You optimistic about the future of Boardman?
I am. I think it's really, it's like a train. It's rolling along. Sometimes it's speeding. Sometimes it's a little slower, but always moving forward. And really proud of our school systems. Wherever I go, my son, he was in Cleveland, and he was in Columbus. He's in Columbus now, and he always comes back to talking about the Boardman school systems and how well-rounded an education he had. He seems to have more so his learning experience at Boardman, more so he thinks favors his career than his 4 years at Case.
Wow, that's great.
Well, Mr. Lonardo, we're about at the end of this edition of Boardman Biography, but I want to take this opportunity to thank you for the many years of service to the Boardman community and your strong support of the Boardman schools.
Frank, as I've often mentioned to you, and as you mentioned, I literally grew up in Lonardo's greenhouse, and I always considered Howard, and especially your dad, though, kind of like almost second fathers to me. And he was working in the greenhouse till the end, still plugging along in there. And being lifelong vegetarians, the Hubermans always found a home at greenhouse, and I can remember, like so many others, buying baskets of cucumbers and tomatoes and all that from there. But what I remember the most was the magnificent Calmurna fig tree that you had just inside the thing. So I hope one day you'll bring that back just for me, because it was pretty great.
We'll have to work on it.
There you go. But you really are carrying the torch for one of the great businesses in the history of Boardman. And I hope you and Donna continue to do that for years to come. It always does my entrepreneurial heart good. My parents started a business in Boardman like that, and it's always great to see family businesses survive and thrive in our great community. So keep up the good work, and thanks for sharing your story with us today.
Thank you very much.
We hope you have once again enjoyed this edition of Boardman Biography. If you have great Boardmanites in mind that you would like to see profiled, please feel free to write or email us your suggestions, and we will try to line them up. In the meantime, thanks for tuning in, and thanks for your continued support of the Boardman Schools Television Network.